The Zetharani Collective had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. Their empire stretched across 300 star systems. Their war fleet numbered in the millions. They had conquered 47 different species and turned them all into slaves. No one in the galaxy remembered a time before Zetharani rule. No one dared to imagine a time after it. When humanity first made contact with the Collective, the Zetharani leaders laughed. These small, soft creatures from a tiny blue world thought they could refuse to kneel? They thought they could say no to an empire that had crushed civilizations older than their entire species. The High Council gave Earth 1 standard year to surrender. Humanity refused. They sent back a simple message: we will not submit. We will not serve. Come if you dare. The Zetharani did not get angry. They did not feel insulted. They simply saw humans as another species to be broken. Another world to be harvested. Another labor force to be chained. High Admiral Kethvaran assembled the largest invasion fleet in 1,000 years. 300,000 warships gathered at the border of human space. Destroyers and cruisers and massive carriers filled with soldiers. It was enough force to crack planets. It was enough power to burn entire star systems. The human colonies along the border sent desperate messages back to Earth. They could see the enemy fleet on their scanners. They could feel death coming for them. The small human defense force took position, knowing they could not win. They prepared to die fighting. Then something strange happened. Deep in human space, beyond the orbit of Jupiter, a ship emerged from nowhere. It was a vessel no one had seen before. 2 kilometers of black metal, shaped like a spear. No weapons were visible on its hull. No shields flickered around it. It ran completely silent, answering no calls from human command. The ship was called the HSS Prometheus. Human commanders sent message after message. They begged the ship to identify itself. They ordered it to hold position. They demanded to know where it had come from and who was aboard. The Prometheus did not respond to any of them. It passed through the human defensive line like they were not there. It did not slow down. It did not change course. It moved with terrible purpose toward the border, toward the enemy fleet, toward certain death. Admiral Sarah Okonkwo watched from her command station as the unknown ship crossed into enemy territory. She tried one last time to reach it. Prometheus, this is Earth Fleet Command. You are moving into hostile space. You will be destroyed. Please respond. The ship jumped into faster-than-light travel and vanished from her screens. On the other side of the border, High Admiral Kethvaran received word of the human vessel. His second officer showed him the sensor data with shaking hands. One single ship had entered collective space. Kethvaran's long gray face twisted into something like a smile. His species had evolved beyond most emotions long ago. But this was simply funny. One ship against an empire? Send 50 destroyers to intercept, he ordered. I want that vessel captured intact. I want to study it. I want to understand what kind of madness makes these creatures think one ship can matter. The destroyer group moved to intercept the Prometheus. 50 warships, each one carrying enough firepower to level a city. They surrounded the human vessel and demanded its surrender. The Prometheus did not answer their hails either. 1 hour passed, then 2, then 3. The destroyer group stopped transmitting. Kethvaran waited for their report. He waited for news of the captured human ship being brought before him. He waited for his officers to tell him the game was over. The report never came. He sent a probe to the last known location of his destroyers. The probe found nothing. No debris, no bodies, no sign of battle. The 50 ships had simply vanished, as if they had never existed. For the first time in a very long time, the High Admiral felt something cold move through his chest. It was not quite fear. His kind had evolved beyond fear, but it was something close to it. "Where is the human ship now?" he asked. His officers checked their scanners. The Prometheus had not stopped moving. It had passed the point where the destroyers had vanished and continued deeper into collective space. It was heading for the inner systems. It was heading for the heart of the Empire. "Send a battle group," Kethvorin ordered. 200 ships. Find that vessel and destroy it. No capture, just destruction. The battle group moved to intercept. They never reported back. Kethvorin sent a full sector fleet. 5,000 warships, the pride of the collective navy. They formed a wall of steel and fire in the path of the Prometheus. The wall disappeared. Reports began to flood into the command center. Outpost 7 had gone dark. Listening Station 12 had stopped transmitting. The garrison at Veth 3 had sent one final message that cut off mid-sentence. The Prometheus moved through Zethrani space like a ghost, like a shadow, like death itself given form. And everywhere it passed, silence followed. The High Admiral stood in his command center and watched the map of his empire begin to go dark. Points of light that represented centuries of conquest were winking out, one by one, drawing a line straight toward the homeworld. "What is that ship?" his second officer whispered. "What have the humans sent against us?" Kethvorin did not answer. He did not know, and that terrified him more than anything else. Somewhere out there, the Prometheus continued its silent journey. It did not deviate. It did not slow. It moved with the patience of something that knew exactly where it was going, and it knew that nothing in the galaxy could stop it. The collective had never known fear. For 12,000 years, they had been the hunters, never the hunted. They had broken species that commanded powers beyond imagination. They had conquered civilizations that had reached the stars when the Zethrani were still learning to make fire. Now something was hunting them. The Prometheus moved through their space like a needle through cloth. It left no trail. It made no sound. Wherever it went, entire fleets simply stopped existing. High Admiral Kethvorin stood before the War Council and tried to explain what was happening. He could not. None of them could. They had sent 20,000 ships against the human vessel. Not one had returned. Not one had sent a final message. Not one had even fired a weapon. Perhaps they escaped, one council member suggested. Perhaps they fled rather than engage. But they all knew that was a lie. Zethrani soldiers did not flee. They had been bred for war over countless generations. Fear had been removed from their genetics. Retreat had been erased from their training. And yet something was making entire crews disappear. The first survivor was found 3 days after the Prometheus entered their space. A patrol ship discovered a drifting frigate near the edge of the Marani sector. The ship was intact. Its systems were functional. But every crew member aboard was dead. They had not been killed by weapons or poison. They had simply stopped living. The medical scans showed no injuries. Their hearts had stopped beating. Their minds had stopped working. They had died where they stood, as if someone had turned off a switch inside them. All except one. The patrol team found her in an escape pod, a young officer named Zeth Kala. She was curled into a ball, her eyes open but seeing nothing. She did not respond when they called her name. She did not react when they moved her to the medical bay. For 6 hours the doctors tried everything. They checked her body for damage. They scanned her brain for injury. They found nothing wrong with her physically. But mentally, she was empty. A shell. Whatever had been inside her was gone. Then, without warning, she spoke. "It showed us." The doctors rushed to her side. They asked her what she meant. They begged her to explain what had happened to her ship. Zeth Kala's eyes finally moved. They focused on the nearest doctor with a look of absolute horror. Tears began to fall down her gray face. The Zethrani had evolved beyond crying long ago. They had removed that weakness from their species. But somehow, she was crying. "It showed us what we have done," she whispered. "All of it. Every moment. Every scream. Every death." She would not say more. She could not say more. The words died in her throat, and she returned to her empty staring. The doctors sedated her and sent a report to the High Admiral. Keth Voron read the report 3 times. He did not understand it. The human ship had no weapons that made sense. It did not fire missiles or energy beams. It did not release poison or radiation. It did something else, something that destroyed minds instead of bodies. "Find out what they are doing," he ordered his science officers. "I need to know how to stop it." But his science officers had no answers. They could not study a weapon they could not see. They could not analyze an attack that left no evidence. The Prometheus continued its journey. It passed through the Veth systems, where gray-skinned slaves had labored in mines for 8,000 years. The orbital stations above those worlds went dark. The military bases stopped responding. It passed through the Morani sector, where a once proud species had been broken and reformed into factory workers. The communication relays died. It passed through the crystal reaches, where the singers of Neth 7 had been forced to use their beautiful voices for nothing but collective propaganda. Those worlds, too, went quiet. And with each system that fell silent, panic spread deeper into the Empire. The common Zethrani had never felt panic before. They had been bred to be calm. They had been taught that their empire was eternal and unbreakable. Now they watched the news feeds and saw something they could not explain. They heard rumors of a ghost ship that killed without killing. They whispered about a human weapon that reached into minds and showed them things that drove them mad. The Council ordered all civilian traffic to halt. They cleared the space lanes and prepared for total war. They called back every fleet from every corner of the Empire. Let the conquered worlds go unguarded. Let the slaves think about rebellion. None of that mattered now. The only thing that mattered was stopping the ship. But Keth Voron knew the truth that the Council would not accept. He had run the numbers. He had studied the pattern. The Prometheus was not trying to destroy their fleets. It was simply passing through them like they were not there. It was taking the most direct route to one place, Zethra Prime, the homeworld, the heart of everything. And nothing they did could slow it down. In his private quarters, the High Admiral did something he had never done before. He activated a secure channel to Earth. He contacted the human commanders directly. "What is that ship?" he demanded. "What have you sent against us?" The human on the other side of the screen was Admiral Okonkwo. She looked tired. She looked worried. But she also looked honest when she answered. "We do not know," she said. "We did not send it. We did not build it. At least, not officially. It came from somewhere else. Somewhere inside humanity that we did not know existed." Keth Voron felt the cold feeling in his chest grow stronger. "Then how do we stop it?" Admiral Okonkwo was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was soft. "I do not think you can." The Prometheus reached the inner systems on the 7th day. Here, at the heart of the collective, the greatest concentration of Zethrani power had been assembled. 100,000 warships formed a wall around the core worlds. Ground armies waited on every planet. Defense platforms bristled with enough weapons to crack moons. The High Council watched from their bunker, deep beneath the surface of Zethra Prime. They had gathered every leader, every general, every mind that had kept the Empire running for 12,000 years. They would face this threat together. The human ship did not attack the fleet. It did not try to break through the defensive line. It simply stopped at the edge of the inner systems and waited. For 6 hours, nothing happened. The Zethrani forces held their positions. They stared at their scanners and waited for the enemy to make a move. Then the Prometheus made its move. It was not an attack. It was not a weapon. It was a broadcast. Every screen in Zethrani space activated at the same moment. Every neural interface connected. Every communication device, from military command centers to children's toys, turned on and showed the same thing. At first, there was only darkness. Then came the light. Then came the memory. The Zethrani saw a world, a beautiful world of purple forests and silver oceans. They saw the people who lived there, tall beings with 4 arms and gentle eyes, the Morani. They had been poets and artists once. They had built cities that floated on clouds and written songs that could make listeners weep with joy. Then the Zethrani came. The broadcast showed the first invasion. It showed Morani cities burning. It showed parents running with their children, trying to escape ships that blotted out the sun. It showed the moment the last free Morani leader was forced to her knees before a Zethrani general. It showed her face as they put chains around her neck. But the broadcast did not just show these things. It made the Zethrani feel them. Every citizen of the collective experienced the terror of that invasion as if they were the ones being conquered. They felt the Morani mother's fear as soldiers dragged her children away. They felt the Morani father's despair as he was marched to the mining pits. They felt 8,000 years of suffering compressed into moments of perfect clarity. And that was only the beginning. The broadcast moved to the Veth, a species of engineers who had built wonders across a dozen star systems. They had created machines that could think and dream. They had almost reached the secret of immortality. The Zethrani came and burned it all. The broadcast showed Veth scientists watching their life's work destroyed. It showed Veth children being tested and sorted. The intelligent ones sent to work, the others sent to die. It showed generation after generation of Veth genius being wasted on building weapons for their masters. The Zethrani watching the broadcast felt every moment of it. They felt the Veth despair. They felt the Veth rage. They felt the slow death of hope that came from centuries of slavery. The broadcast continued. Species after species, world after world, 47 civilizations that the collective had crushed and consumed over 12,000 years. The crystal singers of Neth 7, whose voices had once made stars dance, forced to sing only what their masters commanded. The burning ones of Sector 7, beings of pure energy trapped in metal shells and used as power sources. The last children of the void, a species so gentle they had never invented weapons, slaughtered until only a handful remained. Every crime, every cruelty, every moment of suffering that the collective had inflicted on the galaxy played out in perfect detail. And the Zethrani did not just see it. They lived it. They felt it as if it were happening to them. In the bunker beneath HFY, the High Council screamed. These were beings who had evolved beyond emotion. These were leaders who had ordered genocides without feeling a flicker of guilt. Now they were drowning in 12,000 years of pain that was not their own. High Admiral Keth Voran fell to his knees. Images filled his mind. He saw a Morani child reaching for her mother as soldiers pulled them apart. He felt her fear. He felt her confusion. He felt the moment she understood that she would never see her family again. And he felt responsible. Not because he had ordered that specific act. He had not. It had happened thousands of years before his birth. But he had continued the system. He had maintained the machine. Every slave he had commanded, every conquered world he had overseen, every order he had given had been part of the same great crime. He understood now. He understood what the collective truly was. They were not conquerors. They were not rulers. They were monsters. They had built their empire on the suffering of countless billions, and they had never cared. They had removed empathy from their species because it got in the way of conquest. They had turned themselves into something less than alive. The Prometheus had given them their empathy back. All at once, for an entire species that had spent millennia learning not to feel. Across 1,000 worlds, Zethrani soldiers dropped their weapons and wept. They had never wept before. They did not know how to handle the flood of emotion that crashed through them. Officers abandoned their posts. Pilots left their ships drifting. Guards opened prison doors and walked away, unable to look at the slaves they had spent their lives tormenting. The great war machine of the collective ground to a halt, not because it had been destroyed, because the people running it could no longer bear to be what they were. In the bunker, the High Council crawled on the floor like broken things. Some of them had stopped breathing. The weight of 12,000 years of guilt had simply crushed them. Only Kethvorin remained conscious. Only he still had the strength to raise his head and look at the screen where the broadcast had finally ended. The Prometheus hung in space, silent and patient. It was waiting for them to decide what happened next. The invasion of Earth was supposed to begin at dawn. 300,000 ships waited at the border of human space. Their weapons were charged. Their soldiers were ready. The order had been given days ago. All they needed was the signal from High Command. The signal never came. Instead, something else came through the communication channels. The same broadcast that had paralyzed the inner worlds reached the invasion fleet. Every officer, every soldier, every crew member on every ship experienced 12,000 years of conquest in a matter of moments. Fleet Admiral Veth-Koran had been preparing to give the attack order. He was one of the most decorated officers in collective history. He had crushed rebellions on 50 worlds. He had personally overseen the extinction of 3 species that had dared to resist. When the broadcast ended, he sat in his command chair and stared at nothing. His hands would not move. His mind was full of faces. The faces of everyone he had killed. The faces of everyone he had ordered killed. The faces of children who had died because of him. His second officer approached carefully. "Sir, the attack order?" Veth-Koran did not respond. "Sir, High Command has not responded to our messages. We need to know if we should proceed." The Admiral finally moved. He looked at his second officer with eyes that had changed. Something had broken inside him. Something had also been repaired. "No," he said. His voice was barely a whisper. "Sir? No attack, no invasion, no more." The second officer was confused. "But sir, our orders." "Our orders came from monsters," Veth-Koran said. "I know because I am one of them. I see that now. I see what we have done. I see what we are." He stood up slowly. His body felt heavy with the weight of his crimes. He looked around at his bridge crew. Some of them were weeping. Some of them were staring at their consoles in shock. Some of them had collapsed entirely. "Turn the fleet around," he ordered. "We are going home." Across the invasion force, similar scenes played out on every ship. Captains who had spent their lives following orders found they could no longer give them. Soldiers who had been bred for war put down their weapons. The great machine of conquest had finally stopped. On Zethra Prime, High Admiral Kethvorin pulled himself to his feet in the bunker. Around him the High Council lay broken. Some were dead. The weight of guilt had stopped their hearts. Others had simply shut down, their minds unable to process what they had been forced to feel. He was alone now, the highest-ranking officer still functioning in the entire collective. He walked to the communication console and opened a channel to the Prometheus. "Human vessel," he said. "I am High Admiral Kethvorin. I am prepared to discuss terms." For a long moment, there was no response. Then a voice came through the channel. It was human, male, calm and gentle. "There are no terms to discuss," the voice said. "You already know what needs to happen." Kethvaron closed his eyes. He did know. He had felt the suffering of 47 species. He had experienced their chains as if they were wrapped around his own body. He knew what justice required. The invasion fleet has been recalled, he said. The war is over. That is a beginning, the voice replied, but it is not enough. I know. Kethvaron opened his eyes and looked at the screen. What happens now? That is for you to decide. The collective must choose what it wants to be. We have only shown you what you are. The channel closed. The Prometheus remained in orbit, silent and waiting. Kethvaron stood in the bunker for a long time. He thought about the empire he had served. He thought about the crimes he had committed. He thought about the slaves who were even now looking up at the sky and wondering if freedom was possible. Then he began to work. He sent messages to every surviving officer in the military. He told them what he had decided. Some agreed, some resisted. But resistance was hard when every soldier in the collective had experienced the same broadcast. They all knew the truth now. They all carried the weight of history. He sent messages to the conquered worlds, to the Marani and the Veth and the Crystal Singers and all the others. He told them that things were going to change. And slowly, impossibly, they did. On the mining worlds of the Vex sector, guards opened the gates and walked away. Slaves who had never known freedom stood blinking in the sunlight, unable to believe what was happening. On the factory planets of the Marani system, the machines stopped running. The workers looked at each other with wonder in their eyes. For the first time in 8,000 years, no one was giving them orders. In the crystal reaches, the singers of Neth 7 opened their mouths and sang. Not the songs their masters had commanded. Real songs. Free songs. Songs they had kept hidden in their hearts for centuries. The collective was falling apart, but something else was being born in its place. Kethvaron worked without rest for 3 days. He issued orders. He made arrangements. He did everything he could to make the transition as peaceful as possible. When he was done, he recorded one final message for the empire he had served. I was a monster, he said to the camera. We were all monsters. We told ourselves that we were bringing order to the galaxy. We told ourselves that we were superior. We told ourselves that the suffering of others did not matter. His gray face was lined with exhaustion and grief. We were wrong. The humans have shown us the truth. Now we must live with it. We must become something better. Or we must accept that we deserve to end. He ended the recording and sent it across every channel in the empire. Then he sat down in his chair and waited for whatever came next. Above the planet, the Prometheus continued its silent vigil. Its work was almost done. The message from Zethra Prime reached Earth on the 9th day. It was simple and direct. The Zethrani Supreme Council, or what remained of it, offered unconditional surrender. They would accept any terms humanity demanded. They asked only for the chance to make things right. Admiral Sarah Okonkwo read the message 3 times before she believed it. 9 days ago, she had been preparing for the destruction of human civilization. Now the greatest empire in the galaxy was begging for peace. She sent the message to Earth's government. They debated for less than an hour before sending back their response. The terms were not harsh. They were not punishing. They were simply just. All conquered species would be freed immediately. The Marani, the Veth, the Crystal Singers, and all the others would be given back their homeworlds. They would be helped to rebuild what the collective had destroyed. Reparations would be paid over 10 generations. Not as punishment, but as restoration. The wealth that had been stolen would be returned. The resources that had been taken would be given back. The collective's military would be dismantled. Not completely, but enough to ensure they could never conquer again. They would keep ships for defense, but the days of invasion fleets were over. And most importantly, the Zethrani would have to change themselves. They would have to undo the genetic modifications that had removed their empathy. They would have to become a species capable of feeling again. The Zethrani accepted every term without argument. High Admiral Kethferon signed the surrender documents himself. His hand shook as he wrote his name. Not from fear, but from the weight of what he was ending. 12,000 years of empire, finished with a stroke of a pen. Thank you, he said to the human ambassador who witnessed the signing, for showing us the truth, even though it destroyed us. The ambassador, a young woman named Maria Santos, shook her head. It did not destroy you. It gave you a chance to become something better. Kethvorin looked at her with tired eyes. You are very young. You do not understand what it means to carry 12,000 years of guilt. No, she agreed, but I understand what it means to start over. Humanity has done it many times. We have made terrible mistakes and learned from them. You can do the same. He wanted to believe her. He was not sure he could. The Prometheus departed Zethrani space on the 10th day. It made the journey back to Earth in silence, just as it had made the journey there. It answered no hails, it made no broadcasts. It simply moved through the void like a ghost returning home. When it reached Earth orbit, the entire planet watched. Every screen showed the dark ship descending through the clouds. Every person held their breath, waiting to see who would save them. The ship landed in a field outside Geneva. It was the same field where humanity had first declared itself a united species 300 years before. A fitting place for heroes to return. The hatch opened. 12 people walked down the ramp. They were not soldiers. They were not warriors. They did not wear uniforms or carry weapons. There were 3 psychologists who had spent their careers studying trauma and healing. There were 2 historians who had dedicated their lives to documenting the crimes of powerful civilizations. There were 3 artists who had learned to capture emotion in ways that transcended language. There were 2 engineers who had built the technology that made the broadcast possible. There was one elderly woman named Elena Vasquez. She walked with a cane. Her hair was white. Her face was lined with age. 60 years ago, she had been a child on a colony world when the Zethrani first attacked humanity. She had watched her parents die. She had spent her entire life carrying that memory. And there was the captain, a soft-spoken man named David Chen. He was 53 years old. He had been a teacher before he joined the project. He had spent his life helping people understand each other. The crowd that had gathered did not know what to say. They had expected warriors. They had expected heroes with strong jaws and steely eyes. Instead, they saw professors and artists and one old woman who could barely walk. A reporter pushed forward with a microphone. Captain Chen, the world wants to know, how did you build such a weapon? How did you defeat an empire with a single ship? David Chen looked at the reporter with patient eyes. He had spent 10 days in silence, preparing for this moment. He knew what he wanted to say. It is not a weapon, he said. His voice was gentle but clear. We did not defeat anyone. We did not kill a single being. The reporter frowned. But the Zethrani ships that disappeared, the crews that died. They did not die from anything we did to them, Chen explained. They died from what they did to themselves, what they had been doing for thousands of years. We simply showed them the truth of it. I do not understand. Elena Vasquez stepped forward. Her voice was stronger than her body looked. The Zethrani removed empathy from their species, she said. They engineered themselves to not feel the suffering of others. It made them perfect conquerors, but it also made them blind. They could not see what they had become. She paused, gathering her strength. The Prometheus carried a device that restored their empathy. All at once, instantly. Every Zethrani who encountered us suddenly felt everything they had been blocking out. Every victim, every crime, every moment of suffering their empire had caused. The reporter's eyes went wide. That is why they collapsed. They could not handle it. No, Elena said. Most of them could not. The weight of 12,000 years of guilt is not something you can carry if you experience it all at once. But some of them survived. Some of them are trying to become better. David Chen put his hand on Elena's shoulder. We did not build a weapon, he said again. We built a mirror. We held it up to an empire and showed them what they truly were. That is all. But why? The reporter asked. Why would that work? Chen smiled sadly. Because no one is truly evil. The Zethrani were not monsters by nature. They became monsters by choice. They chose to stop feeling. They chose to stop caring. When we took that choice away, when we made them feel again, most of them could not bear what they felt. He looked up at the sky, where stars were beginning to appear. Humanity learned long ago that the worst things in our history happened when we stopped seeing others as human. When we turned enemies into things, when we convinced ourselves that suffering did not matter. The Zethrani made the same mistake. They just made it for 12,000 years. We gave them a chance to face that mistake, to feel what they had done, and now they have to decide if they want to be better. The reporter was silent for a long moment. Then she asked one final question. Will they? Will they become better? David Chen looked at Elena Vasquez, the old woman who had lost everything to the collective and had chosen to help save them anyway. She smiled. That is up to them, she said. We showed them the truth. What they do with it is their choice. But I believe they will try. I have to believe that. Because if they can come back from 12,000 years of evil, then there is hope for anyone. The crowd began to applaud. Softly at first, then louder. Not for victory, not for conquest, for something harder, for the possibility of redemption. Above them, the stars shone down on a galaxy that had changed forever. The war was over. The real work was just beginning. But for the first time in 12,000 years, 47 species looked up at the night sky and saw something other than their masters. They saw freedom. They saw hope. They saw the future.